podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
Oh, it's a goal. Who got the assist? Who got the assist?
Greetings, sisters. I'm Tom. No baby yet, but I think this is probably the last pod with me for the next couple of weeks. Just saying beforehand that I think this is kind of 95% the last pod with me for a couple. So yeah, here I am, and we're here a day early due to Sam going off to St Mary's tomorrow to watch Saints, which could be pandemonium, I'm reliably told. And we're at half-time in the Man United Brentford game. Thiago's decided to turn to a donkey. Who knew? Lethal finisher turns to this. Why doesn't he do it the weeks that we don't own him? But hey, there we go. And in a bit of a throwback, I guess, we are recording WGTA on a Monday night. I can't imagine now doing what we used to and starting at like 9:45, 10. I mean, me and Nick used to do that. Anthony joined for a bit, and Patish got me down to 9. Oh, dear me. Anyway, joined by Sam. You all good, mate? How are you?
I mean, yeah, it's been a hell of a couple of weeks. Southampton as well, putting me through the ringer. So, Wembley over the weekend. For about 3 minutes, my head was on Mars. And yeah, fingers crossed Tuesday we can throw up another surprise, beat Ipswich and keep it to the final day. So yeah, football is footballing at the moment. I'm really enjoying it. It's a great time to be a Southampton fan for once. And all is going pretty okay with FPL right now as well. So it's all very, very weird. I'm not sure if I'm actually awake or alive or whether something weird has happened and I'm in some sort of weird football heaven. But we did lose against Man City, so it's not all that great. Anyway, hello. We are Who Got the Assist. On today's agenda, it's quite a packed one. Free Hit 34 is in progress. It will be finishing during this stream. So we'll run through how we've been getting on so far, how we all wrap up by the end of the pod, and continuing the meta chats over the last couple of game weeks. This time we're focusing on the premium performance or underperformance, as it were, over the course of this year to see if it has indeed fallen off a cliff, as many do suspect, and does the data support that? So Tom has pulled together some fantastic information on the premium performance this year versus previous seasons. So we'll be running through that. And then as we hit full time in the Man United Brentford game, we'll sum up how the free hit got along at some point. And then we'll start looking ahead to game week 35 with a preview, looking at a wildcard draft for game week 35 for those that are on that pathway in the last few game weeks. And of course, looking at transfer plans for both of us, not on a wildcard, followed by 1 week punts, captaincy, Bruno, Haaland. Are there any other genuine choices there? And then, of course, our teams to wrap up for the week ahead. It is Monday, the 27th of April. Second half of Man United Brentford is about to begin. And we've got another Friday deadline, which, again, I did not know. So that's 2 weeks in a row that I've been tipped off to a Friday deadline on this very pod. So, yeah, thank you for that. It's a Leeds-Burnley game, 8 p.m. kickoff on a Friday night. But I will be on my stag do. So I will be very unaware of what's going on during that game. I just need to make sure I lock in my team before I get whisked away, and maybe delete the app as well, just in case. But anyway, that's not important. What is important are our game week reviews, Tom. So shall we have a look at that first?
Yeah, let's have a look. And you are top of the shop, and you have had simply a transformative couple of weeks. I mean, we spoke about the chips being a little bit samey, but to be fair, you've made the most of them and really, really smashed it over the last couple of weeks. You absolutely transformed your season. Yeah,
I mean, as I hinted at the start of the pod, I'm kind of giddy, really. I don't know what's happened. It's just the things have finally fallen my way a couple of weeks in a row. I hadn't hit even a top 1 million rank in any single game week for the first 32 weeks of the season. And now, like London buses, they've both come at once. And 2 weeks in a row, I've taken my rank from about 350k to now, live at time of recording, 98.5k. So very, very happy with that. A couple of the slightly more differential-ish picks on a free hit have really paid off this week. Obviously, the bench boost went pretty well last week. But having Dewsbury Hall and Gibbs White really were the difference makers this week. I'm on 65 going into tonight. And I think at halftime I'm on 76 with Bruno on a 10-pointer, Thiago on 1, and arguably probably should have buried 1 or 2 there. Very, very lucky. So yeah, what can you say? I've clawed back the 44 points needed to get to top 100k with a few weeks to spare. So I now just need to make it count. I can't remember a period of time quite this lucky as the last 2 weeks. So yeah, what can I say? Brilliant. Love it.
Lovely stuff. So yeah, very good. I think we're kind of around the same area. You obviously outscored me due to Dewsbury Hall over my pick Xavi. At least he soldiered on over the 60th minute. But yeah, poor guy. We're very sorry for him. I mean, really, I think it was just different. It was Mavropanos, wasn't it, at the back for me, and then you had Porro there, and then I had Xavi in midfield, and you had someone else there who I forget.
Dewsbury Hall was your Xavi, and Porro was Mavropanos.
Sorry, my brain's still working quite slowly. But yeah, I mean, I basically stopped the team I had on the pod last Wednesday. I thought it was kind of all right then, and then by the time we hit Friday, I hadn't changed anything, and thought, you know what, I could be sat there tinkering all day. But I kind of felt like I was kind of comfy with the choices I'd made, and also I felt like tinkering would have just been massively counterproductive. Like you'd have been in that scenario where every player I'd be like, oh no, he was so close to my team, etc., etc. And to be fair, I think the player that made the free hit for both of us was Gibbs White, wasn't it? That's just insane. The 13 points. I mean, I think that kind of set it in train as being a really good week, and it's been all right for me. 11k rise up to 40k, so inside top 50k. Pretty happy with that as it is. And I don't think of that far behind me now. I think it's about 20-30 points, something like that.
Yeah, I think it's about that. I'm not realistically looking at catching you. I would just be delighted if we could both get a top 100k finish and cement it as quite a nice year for WGTA. I think that would be lovely. I just got really lucky this week. Dewsbury Hall and Porro coming off for me. There was nothing against a lot of the other picks out there. I just had a bit of a feeling, and it's not often they work out. So yeah, it's nice when they do, and just need to make sure that we don't get too badly punished by the remaining chips, because we're all out now, aren't we? So wild card for a few this week. There are a few bench boosts and triple captains still circulating. I think I saw 98.5% of the free hits are now done in the top 10k, and that usually cross-pollinates through to top 100, 200k fairly well. So yeah, it's mainly those bench boost and triple captaincies that could punish us a bit. So yeah, we've definitely, especially in my position, just inside the top 100k, need to make the last few game weeks count and not let it slip away. I think you're in a much more secure position, but I'm sure you still won't want to drift outside top 50k, for instance. So yeah, important weeks ahead.
Yeah, definitely. And I do think we've got minuscule amount of changes here, and free hit 34 was indeed quite samey. I think 'twas ever thus. Like we sort of saw a little bit of complaining over social media, and it's always going to be that way if playing a chip in a blank game week. I mean, we were saying last week there's a fair bit of variety, but stepping back, I do think there are a lot of the players that a lot of us own did pick themselves. And it's just been a couple of weeks really of quite abnormal effective ownerships and quite abnormal sort of team structures, and things being pulled about all over the place by different chips being used. So 33, quite a few people on free hit then as well. This week, us on free hit versus others and non-free hit, and a lot of non-free hit people have done incredibly well. In fact, probably would match those on the free hit or even beat them this week. So I think gameweek 35 really will be back to normality, and we'll come to it in just a minute. And I think at full time we'll just kind of round off exactly where we're sitting. But I think it has been broadly a success just from getting a fairly decent green arrow and building on last week overall. So I think loads of people competitive this week, and I think for us it really has been more and Gibbs White that's made a difference. And Bowen as well. Shout out to Mr. Danny Dyer, of course.
Yeah, of course. Gibbs White on getting a Friday night haul is just a lovely, lovely feeling in FPL. So I couldn't quite believe our luck when before half time Gibbs White was on 2 returns already. Absolutely unbelievable. But anyway, enough of that. We'll get done for gloating if we carry on too long. We need to get on with the pod.
Yeah, let's do it. Right. So this time we are here to talk about the premium. So premium kind of performances, underperformances. So we're just continuing a bit of meta chat just because the game's ongoing. We've got a look at gameweek 35 in a minute. But I think this is an interesting to just kind of delve into. So this year, I think we've all kind of detected a bit of a slowdown in premiums. For the purposes of this analysis and to simplify it over time, I interpreted the loose term premium to mean any FPL player basically priced over 10 million over the last few years. I think that's fair. I think that's fair to do. And what I did was,
yeah,
I think that's the common definition.
yeah.
And what I did was to go back from 2017-18, from when WGTA actually began to present day and collect data. I used the tool Nick actually put together for this. I'll add it to the notes later if I remember, to do this investigation. I did it to basically find a couple of key points. One, how many premiums there were each year. Note that I've used end season prices here with the proviso that players who earned that price to make it above 10 probably can be counted as premiums, even if they didn't start there. And this also counts defenders, therefore. I know that, but we've kind of discussed DEFCON already and gone through that. And I think the transformative impacts of DEFCON is something that we can talk about in the so whats. And the second thing, so one, how many premiums there were, and two, what the average score was by the time of game week 34. So we've got some fidelity of where we are right now. But give or take, one premium's actually in action right now in Bruno, but the spoilers doesn't change the story at all. Here's that data on the screen on YouTube, just to basically show I haven't made it up. But all of it kind of led me to just kind of putting things on through in a massive table, effectively, yeah. I suppose we should probably try to just kind of summarize this visually, though. And what we'll do is we'll look at a chart, which I'll summarize for the benefit of the audio, which charts the average points scored by a premium price over 10 million at this point of the year as a line chart, and also the number of active premiums in the game as a bar chart. There's one notable removal from the raw number, by the way, which is Harry Kane 23-24, who was priced as a premium but went to buy him before the season began. So he's just removed because he was irrelevant. So looking at the charts, take the average scores. You have a range of, aside from the season, which we'll get to, scores of between 150 and 190. That's what you kind of expect a premium to be getting around this time of the season, averaging around 165, 166 points a year by game week 34. So 166 is a number to keep in mind. We also have a really interesting trend with the overall number of premiums, so the raw kind of numbers. So back in 17-18, when the pod began, was the last time we saw over 10 premiums in FPL. There were loads and loads that were active back then. It was almost a completely different game. You have the likes of Kane, Aguero, Lukaku, Sanchez, Aubameyang, Salah, Hazard, Gabriel Jesus, Morata, KDB, and Lacazette were all over 10 million. Since then, numbers have completely dwindled, especially over the last 3 years following Erling Haaland joining Man City, which we'll discuss at length shortly. The number of premiums in FPL now stands at 5, and over the last couple of years, it's actually just been 4. So homing on this year then, if we're saying the average score by game week 34 for a premium is around 166, it's notable that our 5 premiums this year, we always forget there's 5. That is Haaland, Salah, Palmer, Bruno, and the forgotten one.
Who haven't you said? Isaac.
Yeah, Isaac.
Yeah, sorry.
They've only averaged 132 points between them. So
wow.
Versus last year by this point, notably Salah was having the best year ever, which pushes up the scores. The 4 premiums active had managed to score a whopping 192 points on average at this point. So season on season, that represents a 60-point shortfall, even with an added player, which is absolutely mad. And if you take the score this year versus the overall average, so that was kind of 166, we see a, 33, 34 point loss on what we would be expecting a premium to score. DEFCON has obviously picked up the slack in the game, as discussed a few weeks back with Tom Campbell, and we documented how a defender average has gone through the roof. But this has had numerous effects, which we've touched on at multiple points this season, and especially over the last couple of weeks. But yeah, there we go. Long story short, premiums have fallen off a cliff this year. I think that's really interesting, basically. But let's talk about the why and what it means. So what's your opinion on this overall, though, Sam?
Well, injuries haven't helped. I think that's fair to say. Like, you went through a number of them there, and Isaac obviously has been out for the majority of the year. You've also had Saka and Palmer with their injury worries. So a lot of the premium assets you would have expected to be running at 5-6 points a game throughout the season have been out for significant enough chunks of the year anyway. So I think it's important to just note that because you wouldn't normally expect such a majority of the premiums to be out of the game for so long. That's had a damaging impact. But then also you've got a player like Salah, who usually picked up a lot of the slack. Like even when Haaland signed for City over the last few years, there's been fewer premiums, partly because Haaland has created that bigger price gap, I suppose. It's meant that everything else had to be more competitively priced to fit everyone else in. But Salah also has had a hand in that. He's been a major factor in the last few seasons. And again, he's just kind of fallen off. And if we'd had a game this year where Salah was anywhere near the level of last year, alongside Haaland as well, this would have been still an interesting thing to discuss. But I don't think it would have been in all of our minds as like one of the key topics to discuss going into next season. I don't think we'd be thinking, oh, all the premiums have fallen off. I think it's because Salah has fallen off that it's become so much more noticeable. All of the other players have at points been injured, and therefore I think it's excusable for them. With Salah, it's a whole different issue. It's partly AFCON because he was there for a little bit, but also because he has just dropped off, sadly. And now he's also injured for a little bit as well, which won't help him. And I think your bold claim will come in. But I'm interested to see how this will affect the pricing for next year, because we could go into next year with even fewer premiums. Arguably, that's deservedly the case because Palmer has dropped off even when he's been on the pitch. Saka as well haven't really taken it to a whole new level. And I think there's been much more of an emphasis around the team structure in clubs like Arsenal and Chelsea and Man United to an extent as well, where other assets, other players are also combining and getting routes to points. Much less of a reliance on a talismanic figure, especially Arsenal, I would say, is like the prevalent one, where it feels much more about the sum of the parts and can they find different ways to score goals rather than just relying on a Salah-esque figure. And Liverpool have had that as well this season with Salah dropping off too. So, yeah, I think the different way that teams are now trying to find routes to goals rather than relying on one player, but as a team structure, is also having a slight impact.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think what we're seeing effectively is the evolution of football potentially wrought out in FPL terms with, as you just mentioned, notable individualistic players who previously formed the talisman. I mean, there used to be kind of 9, 10, 12 of these guys in FPL. The fact that we've now got 4 of them who are deemed, 4 or 5 deemed worthy of the premium price tag, just shows exactly what you've said, that the nature of modern football has changed, and that in of itself has impacted FPL. Now, Haaland, I think, is probably a little bit of what created this. So since his introduction to FPL, you know, the premium number went down to 6 that one year. 22-23 actually was probably even though last year was the highest performing year, I think 22-23 was really the heyday for premiums, because Kane, Haaland and Salah were all active at once and they all scored over 200 points that year. What we've seen kind of the last few years is exactly what you've said, that, yeah, okay, there have been premiums, but the game is so heavily reliant on these guys performing, and a few of them performing, to make competitive at the top and to give options. Instead, what you do, if you only have one premium that's performing, is it just creates a sense of, I guess, sameness. Back in kind of the heyday of having lots and lots of premium players who were all performing, 2017-18, well, they weren't all doing it, but you had 8 or 9 players. There was a lot more pressure on your team value, and there were a lot more incidences when you had to make a real choice. And if you made the wrong choice, it became a lot more tricky to jump streams, because you were just like, okay, I've invested all this money in Hazard, for example. Do I move him over to Sanchez, or do I do something else? Do I kind of try to go into Aubameyang? Or, there were loads of different kind of ways to make it work. Now, I think that the idea of kind of this, the importance of your team value has been really muted over the last few seasons. It becomes a lot less relevant, and I think that means that you have this kind of greater accessibility of just basically picking all the best players, and that leads to a lot of things like, okay, we've spoken about last week the context of the end game being a little bit samey, but that plus the fact that you don't really have premiums that you're lumping in on. Indeed, we've all got, but I think a lot of people who did wildcard on 32 went with Palmer, who is a premium alongside Haaland. There's no barrier to entry, even if you do have kind of middling team value, to just buy the best team. And I think that dampens competitiveness. So I think it is quite an important thing, Sam, to have lots of premiums, or at least a few more premiums than we've seen that are viable. This year, there are two, Bruno and Haaland. That is it. The rest of it is basically DEFCON.
Yeah. Agreed. And the thing is with Bruno is he's a cheaper premium. Like we're batching them all together as if they're the same like price and they're all 14, 15 million. But Bruno is more accessible than Haaland or Salah is. And if, say, you had Palmer, Isak, and Salah alongside Haaland all going off at different points this season, because they started at a slightly higher price as well, they might rocket up a bit to make it all even less affordable. And we might be in a position, like you talked about, where you're switching between the likes of a Hazard and a Sanchez and a Bale week on week on week and chasing those big hauls around the fixtures because they are all equally talismanic and they all cost quite a lot of money. And that was fun. Like that was a lot of fun. It was very exciting only being able to get one or two of your favorite picks in at a time. And there was a lot of tactical planning required and brave calls needed to be made to almost stick your mast in the ground and say, no, I'm going to have a Sanchez team at the moment and I'm not going to pivot from that for a while. And hopefully that pays off. Whereas, this season and last season as well, there's just been one very clear premium for the majority of the season and only ever one at a time, really. This year, for a while, it's not really been Haaland, it's been Bruno. But those two, the dip in Haaland's form coincided with the rise in Bruno's. And we never really had a decision to make. It was just, Bruno's there now and he's at 10 million. We can easily afford him. We'll just captain him instead. Most people had him anyway. So it's never really felt like we've been limited by the premiums going off this year or last year, in fact. And I do wonder if that's in part because of just the way like luck happens in FPL. It happens in football where, players get injured, form picks just fall off a cliff. And obviously Salah's legs have gone a little bit. But I think it's also partly because of the way FPL wants the game to be accessible to the masses. They want people to be able to pick the majority of their favorite players. So I think what we've seen is slowly prices just on average falling enough so that the average player can afford a team that looks recognizable and exciting to them. And I think that's a topic we discussed 2 or 3 years ago, less so this year, but I think it is still relevant. I think when you're looking around, most of the picks that people want are still very much affordable. I don't remember that being the case as much prior to Haaland joining, when there were more premiums in the game. Obviously, we've seen a big drop in premiums the second that Haaland signed. I don't think it's just because Haaland signed either. I think it's just around that time, FPL made a decision to say, let's make this more accessible. Everyone can pick more of the players that they want to. And I think we're still living in that universe slightly as well.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think what's kind of really interesting when we think about this year and the introduction of DEFCON is that I kind of think, looking at this, that there has been a lot of I'm sure you've all seen it and we've kind of given voice to it a little bit, a lot of negativity kind of aimed at DEFCON. And we've kind of discussed the reasons as to why, a meatball set piece football taking root this year. FPL couldn't have kind of predicted that, as you mentioned a minute ago, right? And I wonder whether kind of it's almost like a bit of a scapegoat, and this is the real underlying reason. Like, if we did have Isak smashing it at Liverpool, if Palmer was the Cole Palmer that averaged 200 points, that was looking at 200-point season, then I think that we would be in a much more we'd be kind of happier with DEFCON. I think it was designed really as more of a supplementary factor to our point scoring, and the premium engine was what was designed to be sort of the main thrust of where the points go, because obviously premium equals price quality, heuristic equals captaincy, and that has remained. But the fact that you don't really have any other options means that all of that becomes wallpaper, your premium captain. As you mentioned, the transition from Haaland to Bruno, potentially back to Haaland again. But whatever that is, it's just meant that the captaincy has been basically a bit of a unless you've been really punting it, a bit of a non-topic, a bit of a nothing burger. And it has put the focus more on the squad. And if the squad's affordable for everybody, and we've got this new thing that comes in, a new style of football comes in, hey, presto, suddenly everyone's going, oh, DEFCON's so annoying. But the reason for that is because that's new, points are coming in, it's like something that's diverting attention. But the reality is that premiums just haven't been doing their bit. And this game is so reliant on the premiums. It's just so reliant on them. And I just wonder kind of if the trend will continue. I think, it's been a very, very low average this year. Let's kind of not beat around the bush with that. Salah's leaving. I think you can probably back Palmer, Isaac, whether he gets premium price next year or not, we don't know, to recover. But I similar to what you said a little while ago, I'm struggling to see exactly who, apart from Bruno and Haaland, they give the premium kind of price to next year. Maybe Semenyo is kind of there, but he's fallen off the cliff recently. I mean, you can't be looking at Watkins. Would you jack up Thiago? I mean, maybe, but
not to premium though.
Is anyone paying? Yeah, is anyone paying 10 million for a Brentford striker?
Yeah,
I mean, basically, then they're in a situation then where they're reliant on someone coming to the league, aren't they? And Vinny Junior joining Man City. I mean, that's the sort of thing that where we're at. I mean, it's a very interesting sort of conundrum they find themselves in when they're trying to, I guess, make FPL model modern football to some extent. I mean, we could get into, should you still have 3 strikers only? Probably. I don't know. But let's not do that. I mean, let's think about solutions. So could they jack up the prices en masse? Could they just make everyone more expensive? Everyone who's FPL relevant. I mean, I think I'd worry about that, Sam. Like in the past, you remember the box and whisker chart that I did a little while ago when we got new prices and we tried to figure out if they linked performance with price rises and falls. Well, we saw there were a few, like kind of 20 to 30 players that they seem to really have honed in on and really sort of done a job on. But I felt like the rest, they just got on an Excel spreadsheet and just did +5 to this entire group. And it just seemed a bit sort of hit and miss. So I just don't know kind of how they make it work right now. I almost wonder, Sam, if we look to the defenders, given DEFCON, and if we kind of say, right, is this style of football going to remain? But it seems fairly effective. Could we see some defenders, not given premium pricing as such, but given the fact that we've got a lot of rolled over budget or spare budget, remaining budget, could we see a lot of defenders suddenly, being given for a premium defender or a defender who is proven to be fairly good, like Gahey next year? Oh yeah, his kind of entry price is 6.5, and that being quite the standard price. I mean, maybe that's the way we start to allocate some of the money, even if kind of the premiums stay as they are.
Yeah, I agree. I think looking at the landscape for premium options for next year, it's looking pretty sparse. I don't think FPL can take many of the 7, 8, 9 million options and say realistically that they're worth 10 million plus. And I think most people just naturally then avoid those players. And I don't think it makes for a good game if you've got like Semenyo at 10+ million. I don't see that really working as a game structure. What I do think is much more likely, like you say, is towards the bottom end. Everyone does get a little bit of a bump. Anyone relevant gets a bump. Gabriel, for instance, FPL Antiques in the chat rightly said 6.6 points per game is incredible, especially for a defender. I think that's like Trent levels, actually possibly even better than Trent levels, obviously boosted by DEFCON this year. I think when we talk about defenders being premiums, I'd be careful to categorize them in the same way, because premium defenders are not going to be 10 million. FPL just will never create a game where a defender is 10 million, because again, it's just off-putting psychologically to anyone coming into the game. People want to pick attacking options naturally, and if you're a newbie to FPL, you want to see your Haalands and Salahs and Palmers of the world much more expensive than boring old Gabriel. We know, because we've played it for ages, that actually that is one of the most effective players in the game, but they're psychologically just not going to change it up to a 10 million. What they might do, and actually quite likely are going to do, is say, okay, Gabriel gets a premium price point for a defender, cap it at 7.5 million, and then everyone else sort of follows suit. So Tarkowski, for instance, Senesi, if he were have to stayed at Bournemouth on DEFCON Monster, and maybe Anderson as well, all get at least a 0.5, maybe even a 1 million bump. Gahey as well, Nico O'Reilly, the one defender in the world that seems to be getting attacking returns instead of just DEFCON points and is relevant as a result. They'll get bumps. So I think it will just raise that water level a little bit and make everything else in the game a little bit less affordable. And that's the way that they'll probably try and balance it out. The same will go for midfield as well, to a lesser extent. I don't think they're going to put like an Elliot Anderson or James Garner in the same price category as an Mbermo or anything. But I can see them coming in at 6.5 million next season. And what they'll probably try not to do is over-egg the DEFCON prices. They don't want to break the game and say DEFCON players are now 2-3 million more expensive, because what if we revert back to normal in the Premier League? And Mark on Black Box the other day, in one of his only appearances of the season, was saying that they're conscious not to completely rip apart everything they've done this year, knowing that it might not continue on this trajectory for DEFCON. So there might still be a good idea there on DEFCON that they don't want to abandon, and they don't want to bump people too highly and make them unaffordable if DEFCON does go back down to a fairly regular rate from previous seasons.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. But they shouldn't. It's an important balance to strike, but overreacting to one season would be bad. Obviously, they do have to take into account that players like James Garner and Elliot Anderson, as you've mentioned, Casemiro as well, tonight, these players need to be given a price rise because of their consistency in terms of returning points, even if those points are a drip feed compared to your bang and bust sort of more regular players like Bruno and Semenyo. In fact, I was thinking about this actually earlier on the train, the fact that back in the day, we used to kind of call a player a drip feed, didn't we? If they assisted or got a goal involvement, I should say, every 2 or 3 games, we refer to them as a drip feed. I mean,
James
what we've got now, yeah. Well, yeah, what a legend. But now what we've actually got is a drip feed of 1 or 2 players that can just kind of be there every game. I mean, there was a time at the start of the season when we were both salivating over including Casado in our teams, and we were both saying he's going to score over 200 points. I think that there will potentially come a time where you do have an option for a newly promoted team or a mid-table team, depending on the manager and so on and so forth, if DEFCON stays as it is, where you might find this happens. And if they do make DEFCONs harder to obtain for defenders, which I suspect they might do, I wouldn't be surprised, and make it slightly easier for midfielders to obtain, it may kind of, again, upset the balance. So I think, it's interesting to hear what Mark said. And I think that, overall, kind of to just kind of pull us back to the premium thing a little bit, the fact is that I think that there have been relatively few performances this year, aside from maybe Semenyo. I can see him getting a 10, to make you think that we're going to have, Salah's going to leave, Isak's not performed, Palmer's not performed. I think there's going to be relatively few players that actually do kind of ascend to premium. In fact, I think it's perfectly feasible we end up with Bruno, Semenyo and Haaland as the 3 premiums next year, unless we see something outlandish join the Premier League. And I think, ultimately what you were saying earlier on about filling in the gaps with other players, not jacking up the prices entirely, but those players like Gabriel, like Tarkowski, who probably is aging a little bit. So next year, I think he'll be completely out of the equation. But making these players into players that are difficult to obtain or difficult to fit in to an overall team is the best solution, really. It might be that because of the evolution of football, as I said earlier on, the premium as it used to be back in the heyday of premiums is gone. And we're now looking at a world where, 2 or 3 premiums, that's it. But I think that the rest of the team, to reflect modern football, needs to be priced up a little bit. And I suspect this might be the last year that we kind of see this sort of universal affordability be a thing, because it can't continue this way. It can't be the case this time next year that we're sat here going, oh yeah, we know this entire team is still massively affordable. I know as you kind of gave voice to a second ago, that price and defenders high might be a bit unpalatable to some, but in terms of in the interest of the balance of the game, I think they might have to just jack it up a little bit. I think that's probably
up a bit for sure. Yeah, I just don't think like they're not going to be priced in the same way as the other premium positions, I don't think. But I can definitely see them chucking up the average prices of defenders. Like your 4.5 average is now 5 average, and your 6 is maybe 6.5, 7, maybe 7.5 if you're Gabriel, that kind of thing. Not all the way up to like 10, 11 million though.
Yeah. Cool. All right then. So the game's still ongoing. I think maybe I don't think I see any double game week announcements. So let's maybe just discuss that very quickly at the risk of dating the pod. So today was notable purely because City's double game week, normal game week 37 fixture, I should say, have been removed from FPL as of Chelsea and Spurs' for game week 37. So that made a lot of people think, oh, the announcement's probably imminent. And yeah, I mean, what's happening, Sam? How is that kind of going to affect the end of the season, do you think?
Yeah, so there are murmurs going around that City are basically pushing for the Bournemouth game in game week 37. Obviously, it needs to be rearranged anyway. The natural place where it would go would be to the midweek of 37. So it'd still be a game week 37 fixture, but just happen after the FA Cup final in game week 37 on the weekend. But the rumour is that they're pushing quite hard to switch the Palace game and the Bournemouth game. So Bournemouth against Man City will go into game week 36, forming a double game week. And that Palace game would go back to the midweek of 37. So that would give Bournemouth a double game week in 36 of Fulham, Man City, and then a blank in 37. Palace would have a normal fixture in 36 against Everton, followed by a double of Brentford away, Man City away in 37. And Man City would have a double game week in 36 and play in 37 as well. So that's the rumour that they're pushing for. But whether or not that is accepted will be down to the powers that be. The more logical conclusion that most people assumed would happen is just the Man City Palace rearranged fixture just goes into game week 36 and it will get left there in the double, and Bournemouth don't really get involved in the double game weeks or anything like that. Everything just stays as is. So we don't know yet. Yet to be seen. There are rumours that might come on Thursday, I've seen, but nothing concrete. It could happen even while we're streaming now. I doubt it. It is 9:30, but you never know.
That's going on.
Either way, though, does it? If you're on wildcard, it obviously changes a little bit because you'll probably want some Bournemouth players pretty urgently. But a lot of the people who have already wildcarded have triple Man City coverage anyway, have at least double Bournemouth, maybe even triple in quite a few cases. And Palace was always on the menu regardless. This way, you would just have an extra week to get to them if you even wanted to get to them in the first place. Has much changed? What do you reckon, Tom?
Well, I mean, just to mention the request from a football point of view and a slightly Arsenal point of view, if this is true and be heavily caveated, obviously it gives City an advantage in the league. I think it means Bournemouth get 3 days rest ahead of game week 36, whereas I think they get about 10 if City played them in 37, and that would obviously massively benefit City. It would also mean that they play their game in 37 after Arsenal play Burnley, and they therefore know the goal difference needs, if that's still relevant. So it does benefit City for it to go that way. For them to switch the fixture over is quite unprecedented as far as I can tell from a rudimentary look around. So let's see. Ultimately, I think for from my selfish perspective, as someone who wildcarded in 32 triple Bournemouth, I would absolutely bloody love it if they agreed with what City are asking for. From an Arsenal point of view, I wouldn't, but from an FPL point of view, which is what we're here to talk about, I'd love it because I've got triple Bournemouth already, and we'd end up with 2 double game weeks to end the season with. That'd be great. Even though Palace, I mean, it wouldn't be the best double game week in the world, would it? Brentford away and City away, but I think that would be fun to have 2 doubles. I mean, very unusual, but it'd be great fun. And we've all, you and I at least, have planned to have transfers in hands to deal with Palace. And it would, it might end up being that actually we don't even look at them anyway, because they may be busy with other things. And you may, as James was saying on Planet the other, which made me laugh earlier on, if there is massive rotation for Palace because of their other considerations, namely the Conference League, you may end up with buying a Palace player purely from the Man City game alone. That sounds awful. So it might be, Sam, that if the scenario that City are asking for goes ahead, that free transfers are basically that were earmarked to go to Palace players are just freed up completely for people like you and me. I think you'd have to buy. You're probably looking at buying Senesi or another Bournemouth player, so maybe one less. But still, you'd end up with a couple more players. You'd be able to punt it out. There'd be more sort of creativity, I guess, of what you can do. That'd be quite good fun. In my head canon here for what's happened, my hope, I guess, are 2 things. One is that Palace didn't want their fixtures moved due to the Conference League, and 2, the Premier League prefer to move Bournemouth, not Palace, because the latter have a role to play in the Premier League title as well. So there could be loads of reasons that feed into this. We simply don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, let's see. I think it's 11 days from time recording to game week 36. So it does seem a bit wild that these fixtures are still in the offing and we don't really know what's happening with them. I mean, from it kind of is kind of a bit of a split, kind of a split brain sort of thing. Where if Arsenal, I don't want that to happen. Don't agree, Richard Masters. But from an FPL point of view, it does feel like fun to have a double. 2 doubles to end the season with, and also I think maybe I'll be looking at Palace and thinking, nah, I just don't want any of them. I'll let other people fall for that trap, but I'm not going to. So I think it would open up an interesting sort of end of season possibility for a lot of people to be thinking about.
Yeah, it's another interesting piece to the jigsaw to end the season with. If they do this new combination with Bournemouth doubling, I unfortunately think that it probably lends itself to wildcard as this week having a team that does look quite a lot like wildcards in 32, and it already looked quite a lot like it anyway, which we'll come on to. If you then add triple or double Bournemouth into the mix in game week 35 on a wildcard, there are a lot of similarities. So that would be unfortunate. And then, of course, also free transfers to get away from them might be something you might want to do as well in game week 37. I completely agree on Crystal Palace. I think wherever they get the double, it's risky to go for many of them now, especially in the forward areas like Sarr, Strand Larsen, Mateta. All of them just feel so risky to go with that. It could pay off. Even in one fixture, they might have a good game week, but I don't know whether it's worth too many free transfers to get across there. Aside from maybe Henderson in goal, seems fairly locked for playing both in the double, might get a few saves. Don't think clean sheets are massively on the radar if it is Man City and Brentford both away, though. And then you're looking at the DEFCON defenders like Lacroix, for instance. And again, it doesn't feel like a really exciting way to finish the season, looking at like DEFCON defenders and new goalkeeper transfers to get to a double game week. So that's a bit of a shame. Man City, obviously, we know anyway. It's just what the double ends up being. It will still be the same 3 fixtures, just might change the order. So then it might be a case of, well, have you got the correct 3 Man City? And at least with wildcarders this week, they've got an opportunity to get it right now. It's so funny how quickly the best Man City triple up changes. Even on the pod ahead of game week 32, we were saying, just wait 4 or 5 game weeks. Someone's going to be terrible all of a sudden. And lo and behold, there's a new sexy Man City asset that everyone wants, and Semenyo is being pushed to the side. So, yeah, could happen again. But that is an advantage for wildcarders because it's a transfer you don't need to use. You can just get Cherky. I'm interested in which way it's going to fall, but I don't think it changes much for me, honestly. I'm pretty relaxed about it either way. On double Bournemouth, I could just get Senesi or someone else, who knows.
Not Evan Nilsson. Never Evan Nilsson.
Not Evan Nilsson. No, I'm not doing Evan Nilsson. Maybe Krupi. No. It would be Senesi almost certainly. And then I don't know how many transfers I'd even want to use on Palace. It'd probably be towards Arsenal more than any other team right now. But yeah, should have a couple of spare as long as there's no terrible injuries, and because we've just bench boosted, our squads are pretty deep as well, so we could survive an injury or two without a transfer. Yeah, I don't know how much this actually really impacts anything, really.
But funnily, it's very funny you say that, because like the more I thought about this, it kind of feels like it's thrown the upcoming double into sharp relief, because the City thing, and a luxury transfer of Semenyo to Turkey, that's something that's on my mind. But the other side of it, and the fact we were kind of both sat there thinking, right, I need a couple of transfers just to make sure I can kind of get a Palace player or two.
Yeah.
Just the fact that this game week has had a lot of emphasis on it, it has kind of made me question the validity of kind of, it's a double, I'm just going to go for it regardless. When really, especially if the orthodox route of Palace getting Everton at home, City away does happen, then I think my interest can be very, very, very muted. I mean, do I really want Dean Henderson make a goalkeeper transfer that week? I mean, that's a bit of a throwback for me making goalkeeper transfers, but I just don't know. I just don't know if I'm interested in them, full stop. So maybe all this has done is basically just released me from the prison of thinking, I need to have those transfers earmarked for Palace, and maybe it regardless just makes me kind of think a bit more about making the kind of transfers which week to week for the last few weeks, especially with other people having chips in play, could maximize differentiation, especially with, as you said earlier on, wildcard, we've got similar deep teams. If I've got transfers to use, I mean, what am I saving them for at this point? Not very much. I mean, you don't get any prizes for having 5 free transfers at the end of the year. You don't get like kind of extra point that doesn't turn into extra points. That'd be quite a funny thing for them to implement, wouldn't it, at the end of the year? But I don't think that's a thing. So yeah, maybe it's just kind of underline the fact it's not the best double game week ever for the other side that isn't Man City. Oh dear.
Yeah.
All right. Oh, there we go. Let's go into the 35 preview then, because we've touched on it a couple of times. Here we've got there's a few things to kind of go into here. I think I think next week, I was going to say we, but probably you and whoever's guessing, or maybe just you, we'll bring formless fixtures back for that. But let's park it this week, because there are a lot of people on wildcard, and I think that's a nice sort of springboard into just discussing the week ahead. We won't do the fixture by fixture thing we've done the last couple of weeks, because it's kind of back to some normality, especially for those of us who are now chipless. But there are others who are setting up their wildcards with bench boost imminent, maybe whenever that City double game week comes through. And there are actually a lot of people who have set up their bench boost for this week, so it's not kind of a chipless week. There's a lot going on. I grabbed with permission a Wildcard 35 draft from social media, a friend of the pod, FPL Spons on Blue Sky, who prefaces the Wildcard squad he's picked here with, can't lie, picking a Wildcard 35 team is just like this whole season, pretty dull. Yeah. The player pool is so small, I can't find any exciting picks.
Yeah.
It says it all when I have half of the same picks as Wildcard 32. So for the benefit of the audio, the wild card is in goal, Raya, Verbruggen, defenders, Gabriel, Munoz, O'Reilly, Strike, Van Hecke, midfield, Bruno, Cherky, Rogers, Sarr, Eza, and up front, Haaland, DCL, and Welbeck. And obviously, it's subject to change depending on the double announcement. So if it goes to Bournemouth, then I suspect the change would be Munoz going over to Senesi or Hill, and probably Sarr would end up being Tav. But yeah, it really is a team that I recognise. Sam, it does look like it possibly could have been a wildcard 32 side or a wildcard 32 side after a couple of transfers have been used this week. I mean, do you think Swans is right in what he said about kind of the fact that the player pool is fairly small?
Yeah, I think he's basically spot on the money with it. I'm not surprised by it though, and I don't think it's just because the player pool is small. I think it's because wildcard 32, because it's really not that long ago. We were basically picking a team for these game weeks as well, but with the caveat that they also needed to have that double game week in 33 and a decent fixture in 32 as well, ideally. But it was, the wild card was built with these set of game weeks ahead of us still in mind. So a lot of the players that we currently have are ones that ideally would go in on a wild card 35, because that is the way that a lot of wildcarders in 32 would have planned it. There will be differences, of course, because you don't need to worry about the previous double game weeks. But a lot of the hangover effects will still be relevant, because the teams that blanked last week are the reason that we all free hitted and are back on the team that we've got right now. So I think this looks like a really strong wildcard team. Unsurprisingly, featuring teams with a lot to fight for. You've got double Palace in there. I don't know if I'd go triple Brighton, if I'm honest now. If I was wildcarding today, I'd probably swerve them a little bit more. They've got decent fixtures. I mean, Wolves at home in 36 is nice. Man United final day at home, not bad. But I don't know if I'd go triple. So that might be a place where I'd have a look elsewhere. The Palace players as well. I think it's good to have Palace players in, especially if you're wildcarding now, save some free transfers for later. But Munoz and Sarr, I'd be very worried about rotation with that. And I know I think they'll be quite differential in itself. So I know they've mentioned that this just feels really dull. I would say those two are exciting picks, because I don't think many managers are going to be brave enough to go with them, because I think it's going to look like the minutes are going to be managed. So I would more often assume it would be Henderson in instead of a Bruggen, Lacroix in instead of Munoz, maybe no Sarr, maybe triple up Palace defensively, so something like that. Rodgers is also an interesting one. Liverpool, Man City to close the season, so maybe there's a plan for a transfer in game week 37 on that one. So again, I don't think he'll be particularly popular. And then Eze as well instead of Rice is also quite a nice differential shout. Mind out on the injury doubt. It looks like it might be nothing, but he did come off with a slight knock in game week 34. So one to monitor, but I do like that. And again, he'll be pretty differential as well. So it does sound boring on the surface of it. There are a lot of samey picks in here, but I think there's still a bit to get excited about here. I think there's enough here. And as we showed in game week 34, you only need one or two players different and those players to haul to make all the difference. And that's all that's happened for me personally in the last couple of game weeks. I haven't had like crazy left field punts out of nowhere. It's been one or two tactical bets that have just gotten a bit lucky, and that could do the job. So we'll see. I think there's enough here to separate you.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, so I guess for the benefit of the next kind of week ahead as well, in lieu of form versus fixtures, I think it might be worth talking about a few differences from wildcard 32, or if you're bench boosting this week and you wildcarded earlier on to try to figure it out, and you didn't have the foresight. Like we didn't. I'm not having a go at you. To include a few of these players, it might be worth just discussing them. So, let's start number one. Cherky over Semenyo.
Yeah.
Especially with, as I mentioned earlier on, because covering a few bases, Bournemouth do get the double. It will free up a transfer for us in wildcard 32 to look at a luxury crab type move like that. Obviously, the theory is that as soon as you sell Sam, Semenyo at 80% EO smacks you in the mouth, which is not unheard of around these parts. Going to jail for stealing a loaf of bread, so Jean Valjean. I mean, but it is something that I've been thinking about even more than I should. Maybe it is just action bias. I think I would be leaving it this week. That is almost definitely what I'll be doing, but it is something which has cropped up a lot in my thoughts about the next few weeks when I've just kind of been idly thinking about what I'm going to do. I do like it, and I think if you are wildcarding this week, or you've got a transfer this week and you want to differentiate, so you're kind of sat with 4 or 5 free transfers, you're like, well, I don't know what to do with these now, then maybe that could be an interesting one to go for, to make a little bit of ground wherever you are.
Yeah, I am quite tempted by that move myself with a couple of free transfers in the bank. I won't be doing anything until we do get that double game week announcement. But if it falls the way where we don't think we will need to use as many transfers to get to Palace players, then I would be quite tempted. Cherky has looked a lot better than Semenyo, but I share your worry, your paranoia that the second you sell a player like Semenyo, Pep could change the system yet again after his rest against Southampton, comes back in, plays more centrally, bags a couple of goals against Everton. And then all of a sudden you've got the wrong Man City triple up again ahead of the double game week. So I think I'm more likely to make that move the following week, but that is a key difference that a wildcards team could make. And he does look like the better pick right now. And it's more likely than not that he still will be the better pick come game week 36. So yeah, he's cheaper. He's got better data. He's playing more centrally, much more involved in the cutting end of everything good that Man City are doing. So yeah, I really like him. If I had 3 or 4 free transfers, I'd probably make the move. But with 2, it's likely that I miss out for this week and then have a very close eye on potentially making that move for the double if I feel like he's way, way ahead of Semenyo by that point.
Yeah, I mean he's been all right, hasn't he? To the eye, obviously incredibly exciting. And in terms of the non-pen XGI per 90, you're looking at 0.8, which is really, really good. I don't need to tell you don't need to tell you that. Of players who have basically played loads and loads of minutes, I think it's only second to Haaland in terms of underlying data per 90. Which looks like an excellent call. Dan in the chat said he's moving Bruno to Cherky. I mean, that's a really good move.
Yeah.
Semenyo has been very quiet for a while. I don't know whether it's just because of Cherky's instructions to the team and Pep settling on this one. He was saying about, I was reading about all the fringe players at City and what happens. And in terms of Marmoush and co, he was kind of saying, well, I've got a very settled team. It's very unlucky for these players who are out of the team. But if you've got a settled team and it's winning, why change it? So I don't know whether it's kind of Semenyo's lost that sort of novelty effect sort of thing going on with regard to him being an unknown quantity at City and he's now a bit of a known one, and Cherky's benefiting from that, or it's just that Cherky being central in that 10 is just doing a great job for his owners and making us cast covetous glances. I really like it. One that definitely I'll come back to next week. Whether I'm here or not, I'll be thinking about it while I'm cradling a crying newborn. Right, okay. Other points of difference. Elephant in the room. No Chelsea. Wildcard 32 have likely at least 2. Parma, João Pedro, Nottingham Forest at home. Nottingham Forest, who will have a semi-final with Villa to contend with. Both of these players are back for the cup. Pedro started, Palmer off the bench. There will be a lot of people with these 2 players burning a hole in their pocket and also in their sides. They're good little piggy banks, aren't they, Sam? And I feel like this week, if Forest are busy thinking about the Europa League, like I really want that game to be like a 1-1 or something. Because that would be absolutely ideal for those 2 players. And then from there, you can just do it. If you're wildcarding this week, I just can't see a world, even though there's going to be some issue, where you would include them. I mean, I know that Swansea has chosen Welbeck, and there may be a call if you are wildcarding, but wildcarding in a good spot to maybe kind of go, you know what, I'm just going to include João Pedro to cover my downsides. But realistically, I struggle to really see a world where you'd include a Chelsea player this week.
Yeah, if I was on a wild card, I can't say I would include either of them. I don't think they're bad picks, but they don't scream players in the top of their peak of their powers right this very second. Like you need to be shielding yourself with them against the crowd. I think those are 2 places where you on wildcard want to try and take on that ownership and say, you know what, they're not in great form. They've both had little injuries. I'm going to take it on and hope that it pays off. But they are powerful players, and on their day, they're very capable of getting big hauls. And they're both back fit now. So I think it's one of those situations where if you've wildcarded and you've still got them after wildcard 32, I don't think you need to rush to get them out. And you might see them as your differentials to the wildcarders in 35 and feel pretty comfortable with that. But I think we'll learn a lot from that Nottingham Forest game. Whether or not they play well, whether or not they get a haul or two between them, will obviously massively impact our ranks, but also impact our decision making as to whether or not they do become piggy banks ahead of game week 36 and beyond. Palmer, for instance, if by the time we get to game week 36, 37 and Saka's looking like he's getting good minutes, that could be a swap that is very appealing ahead of the Burnley fixture. João Pedro equally could become Thiago or Bowen or one or two other strikers as well if you fancied it. But I don't really see any need to force it this week. Again, if you've got a few spare transfers and you're really feeling someone like Thiago, making sure that you're not exposed to ownership there, then it's fine. It makes sense. It's on my radar as well as a potential. But I don't feel under massive pressure to make those moves. And I think if you're wildcarding as well, I wouldn't feel under massive pressure to include them. I think it goes either way, and it's a gamble as to whether or not they turn out to be effective players straight away under. Is it McFarlane? Is that the right?
Seth MacFarlane's come in. Yeah.
Seth MacFarlane, the Family Guy creator.
Exactly. Brian and Stewie are in charge now. I think it's Liam, isn't it?
Liam, yeah.
Callum, yeah. One of the M's. I'm calling him Seth from now on.
Seth's a strange brother, yeah.
Nice one. Yeah, no, you're completely right on that. And I think that there is kind of a real politique kind of thing where you'd be like, all right, João Pedro, just chuck him in. But I think you're right to kind of just go with the fact that you've got 1 week of exposure, and then after this, I think there'll be a lot of people who do remove the Liverpool game in 36. You started touching on Arsenal there, so I think that's worth discussing. I feel like, for me, the Salah injury this week actually makes my life a lot easier. Obviously, it'd be lovely to own him again. For game week 38, that nostalgia captain was always in mind for me. But I think for now, I'm probably not, depending on what Slot says and so on and so forth, I'm probably not going to want to force him in 38. Maybe he'll get 10 minutes off the bench, or he'll get kind of in his tracksuit, a bit of a walk around with his daughters and stuff at Anfield. But I don't think I'm going to be looking at bringing him in. So tripling up on Arsenal by 37 is going to be really important to me. And I can see why Swans has gone for Eza, obviously with a watch out for injuries earlier on, Gabriel and Raya here. And this week's actually right. This week is fine fine on paper, because Darlow has Burnley, likes to strike, Biol, all of them have Burnley. So you feel right. Senesi and Hill have got Crystal Palace, who'll be distracted by the Conference League. So they kind of fill in the gaps. Next week, though, and Fulham, and obviously for us, the Fulham game sandwiches the FSE game. I'm very nervous about the Fulham game, not going to lie. But the reality is that probably it's all right this week. But soon, I think double Arsenal defence is going to have to come back on radar very, very quickly, because not having two is probably going to be a loser in the book. So protecting rank is going to be really important. Like one of my transfers, game week 36, 100% is probably going to be another Arsenal defender. Unfortunately, Saliba is unfortunately the one I'm looking at right now, just because of availability. It'd be lovely if it was Timber. Don't really see a point in buying. Obviously, Ray got 10 points this week, but I don't really see a point with Brighton have got Wolves, haven't they, at home in 36. I don't really see the point in doing a goalkeeper change. So probably would be something like that, just to cover off the downside, which sounds incredibly dull, but might be the right thing to do. So there's that, and also though 37. For us who have wildcarded earlier, I think that we've got a bit of time to size up the third Arsenal attacker. I mean, it looks like the Havertz injury isn't bad. We'll see. But if he is being kind of, is it covered in cotton wool, wrapped in cotton wool?
Wrapped in cotton wool.
Then maybe Gyökeres suddenly kind of bursts onto the scene as an interesting pick, especially for that Burnley game in 37. So, I mean, defensive pick I think will come, and then you've got another transfer earmarked for Gyökeres, and then depending on the double, then I think you only need kind of 2 or 3 transfers really there to kind of just make all that work, don't you? Assuming you're triple double City anyway, which most people are.
Yeah, exactly. I think Arsenal are going to be one of the teams that people start to like load back up on after wildcarding 32. Obviously, wildcarders this week are just going to go straight for at least double, probably triple Arsenal. If not now, very, very soon. It will be the wildcard 32ers that will want to try and make those transfers to catch up. There are a number that do have Gabriel, but also a significant number that don't. So that's a transfer used up just to get back to single Arsenal defence. And then, yeah, like you say, it's about trying to figure out where that second Arsenal defender might come from at the moment. Saliba feels very dull, but probably the only defensive asset you can really go for. At right back, it's too much of a mystery net right now. You've got Hincapié, maybe, but you've got Calafiori coming back in as well. So I don't think his minutes going to be secure enough. And then, like you say, I did look at Raya, but like the keeper fixtures for the remainder of the season are fine for my team and probably for a lot of wildcarders back in 32. So it doesn't feel like a powerful use of a free transfer. So yeah, it's a tough one. And I know you mentioned Gyökeres, Eze's floating around as well. Could be a nice upside attacking differential. They don't really like light a fire in me or anything. And Gyökeres won't be easy to get to it. What price is he at the moment? Like 8.59 million?
Yeah, he's 8.8.
8.8, yeah. So not easy to get to for a lot of people. I don't know. I'm struggling with Arsenal. I've got transfers set aside for them. I don't really know what I'm going to do when I get to that point. And I'm like, okay, now which Arsenal players am I going for? Aside from Gabriel, I'm not in love with too many of them. It might just default to Rice, but that's so boring. I would like it to be Saka, but I just don't know if I can trust the minutes. So yeah, I think if you're on a wild card, it's a great advantage because you can just get Raya because he is better than the other keepers, but probably not by enough to make it worth a transfer for those who are using transfers to get there. So that's quite a nice little advantage that any wildcarders will just naturally have this week.
Yeah, I can't. I'm really struggling to get on board with Rice. So the last kind of time he got like it was 9 points was mid-February. The last time he did a goal was like, I think it was the Bournemouth game, wasn't it? And kind of game week 19.
Yeah, when he got the brace. Yeah,
in really early January. And I feel like he's a player that is a love and leave for the course of the season. But when you're in the last few weeks are basically just free hit weeks every week almost, where you're trying to maximize upside. I just can't get behind that at the moment. And I think he's knackered. Honestly, I just think he's absolutely like, even if he's physically, he's still kind of obviously sprinting around the 90th minute. But I think there's lots of stuff about the mental side as well. I just feel like that part of him is slightly impacted by the fact he's just playing so many games. Like we were saying about Saka in the past, about if he's got one leg, then he'll be played by Arteta. That's now Declan Rice, because of the important job he does for the team. But I just don't know, man. I don't know. I just can't get behind it. And the benefit of wildcarding in 32 means that I don't have to deal with it until probably in 37 for the Burnley game, where I'll be like, right, okay, I'm going to take one. Who that one is, as you've kind of given voice to, we will see. I just don't know. I just don't know. Yeah, right, other thing. Sorry, go ahead.
No, that was it.
Okay, perfect. Right, other things to discuss. End designs to get Thiago the donkey for tonight, at least, back. Probably going to be a key exposure going forward, not including Swan's wildcard team, not either of our teams. I would note that since January, João Pedro is basically keeping pace in terms of XGI per 90. Chelsea have been a roller coaster. Do you take him on, knowing what he can do? Or is he a player that's just kind of one that throughout the course of the rest of the season, you're going to be like, meh, you know what? Thiago again, Thiago. I'm just going to kind of probably divert my transfers elsewhere.
Yeah. I think I'd probably include him if I was wildcarding, honestly. I'm struggling with whether or not I'm going to use a transfer on him, because I think you could look at taking him on. He's got 2 nice fixtures, but 2 pretty awful ones. So it's basically a 50-50 split. He had a poor game tonight by all measures, by the looks of it, but he's been consistently excellent all season long. And he does have a couple of nice home fixtures, West Ham and Crystal Palace, I think, when Crystal Palace might have an eye on European competition at that point. I wouldn't be surprised at all if he finished off the season with another 2 or 3 goals yet. And there just aren't that many other strikers that I'm like in love with at the moment. Like Welbeck's fine. Calvert-Lewin is Calvert-Lewin. Bowen is assisting like no one else, but can't score at the moment. And then you're looking at players like Gyökeres and João Pedro, who, correctly is keeping pace XGI wise, but it's very streaky. And I would like to see him on the right side of that streak ahead of the last few game weeks of the season. So it is a tempting maneuver, but it does feel a little bit sideways now. I don't know. I probably wouldn't make it this week, although he does have a good fixture, and I am very worried about not owning him for 35.
For us, I think it's more of an issue. I would be inclined to agree with you completely that in the Welbeck slot, I would have Thiago in there. I think that would be the only my kind of main note about this particular wild card.
Yeah.
I don't know when the time would come that he'd come in, which is why I've been kind of maybe looking at it this week. But as per that João Pedro point, I do kind of think that I keep him. Daniel in the chat has just said that Thiago has 3 goals versus West Ham that I've sort of hat against him this season. So something to bear in mind. Goals are going to come probably at some point, but I think kind of the fact that this week I've got João Pedro and next week they've got City, those work as kind of convenient reasons to not go there. Maybe the Palace game in 37 could be one that I just cover off if I've got the free transfers spare. I don't know, man. It's a tricky one. But it kind of feels like, well, Calvert-Lewin has got Burnley at home. Haaland's not going anywhere, obviously. And João Pedro's got Forest. I don't know, do us all a favour, Seth, and tell us that João Pedro won't start. I mean, that'd be great, honestly. Right, elsewhere as well, of conscious of time, the Forest players, the West Ham players, the form teams. Forest probably have got a bit of a context surrounding their inclusion. So Gibbs White, I think, is the most bought player this week, isn't he? Wouldn't be surprised if he is. Yeah, he is.
I think he was last week as well, right?
Yeah. But they've got obviously the Europa League. So
and Chelsea away.
That's it. Have managed to miss the boat there, and then the West Ham players. I mean, obviously they are playing like absolute demons right now. Could they be players that we're thinking about, even though the fixtures aren't particularly alluring?
Possibly. It does feel a bit boat missed, honestly, with Gibbs White in particular, and Bowen as well. The fixtures are middling. That you would be going after form picks that are talismanic in their teams. You've got players fighting for their lives, or less so with Nottingham Forest because they're a couple of points out of the mire, but they're still very much in that relegation fight. They need more points to secure it. So I think it depends how much you value the requirement of fighting for the last few game weeks of the season versus fixtures versus quality of team, because Bowen and Gibbs White are just very consistent picks regardless. Gibbs White, I know we've both really just enjoyed his latest haul. I don't know if I'd be buying him now. The fixtures aren't quite as good. Forest might have one eye on Europe. It feels like an okay pick, but I wouldn't be prioritizing him ahead of others now. It does feel a little bit like points chasing. And Bowen, probably quite similar, to be honest. The thing is with both of these picks, you could have them in all season long and they would do you a great job. Like, you could just leave them there. They'll consistently tick over, and I'm sure they will continue to do so for the remainder of the season. But with 4 game weeks to go, it feels like there are better fixtures to be targeting and to go after. So I don't know whether I'd prioritize either on a wild card, but certainly not bad picks. Definitely not bad picks.
Cool. Well, I suppose overall there is some scope for flexibility, but it kind of feels a little bit like well, we as Game Week first two wildcarders may be using this week's gather info. I mean, spoilers for the week ahead chat in a minute. We always knew it'd land kindly this week for us. And for those wildcarding, I think there's obviously the bench boost setup to think about. And if you're bench posting this week, I think you probably already know what you're doing. So the game's just finished, Sam. How have you finished up overall?
75 points, just outside the top 100k. I think I'm 1 point out at 102k. So yeah, buzzing, absolutely buzzing. Really good week. Just need to creep inside the top 100k in the last 4 game weeks of the season. It won't be easy because there are chips that people are using. But yeah, really happy. Shame Thiago didn't have his shooting boots on tonight. It could have been even better, but I'm not one to complain on a week like this.
No, that would have been very nice, wouldn't it? 66 for me, so 41, just inside 41k. After Poro lost his bonus.
Yes,
yeah, I mean that's always good. Not going to complain too much either. All right, on to 1 week punts for the week ahead. Last week, we got 6 more for Turkey. The week before, which was still in play, and I got Morgan Gibbs White last week, 13 for me. Bruno for you has gotten 5. So it's just 2-4 for me, and versus the graphic on screen, we didn't know at the time when we put it on that we 176 for you.
Yeah,
and this week we're both back in the leads, boys.
Yeah, I've already had DCL, so unfortunately can't go for him again. So I'm going for my DEFCON darling Strauch at the back, and he's got a bit of goal threat as well. So who knows, might even bag one. But I'm starting in my lineup as well. Fancy it. I think he'll be okay.
And I've used DCL as well. I completely forgot about that. But I had, so I've gone.
Doing?
I don't know what we were thinking. So Noah Okafor is my man. All right, on to captaincy this week. So Bruno versus Haaland, I think it's actually a bit of a live debate. Since the turn of the year, Bruno 0.8 XGI per 90, a game with 34 data, of course. Sorry, game with 33 data, of course. And Haaland 0.72, so razor thin margins between the two of them. Haaland plays on Monday night, doesn't he? So something maybe to bear in mind if you go for the captaincy on Bruno on the Sunday, you'll still be waiting for the Haaland game on the Monday. It's bank holiday on Monday. So I think that's maybe something that would be in mind for a lot of people. Obviously at home, Bruno does perform in the big games. I think didn't say very much about Bruno's proclivity for scoring loads of points, but this needs to win, and maybe that's the thing which puts you into just giving it to Haaland and covering your downside. I think both will end up probably this week above 100% EO, Sam.
Yeah, I'd be surprised if they were under. Bruno will probably be a bit lower, but 105, 110 maybe. There'll be overhang of the previous game week. There always is on captaincy. So yeah, I think Bruno will be slightly above. He's also got the home fixture, and he's unbelievably consistent at home. So I don't think it's a bad call at all to look at Bruno at home to Liverpool. But I think I would sway towards Haaland away at Everton more so. Yeah, they need goals, right? They need to start putting teams to the sword to get that goal difference up. It feels like quite a nice fixture given the context around Everton right now. I don't think they're still. I think they're still technically fighting for things, but losing against West Ham hasn't helped their case. No. I wonder if 2 or 3 players will be looking at getting to the beach a bit early. Yeah, I think Haaland for me, but Bruno is not a bad shout by any means. Home to anyone, even if it is Liverpool, is not a bad way to be looking at going against the grain. But yeah, I think Haaland will be the standout and will probably be my captain too.
Yeah, I think on Everton, if you read the tea leaves, right, if they win and Fulham, Brentford, Chelsea, Bournemouth and Brighton will lose, they could be up to 5th, or near 5th, near 6th, which could be a Champions League position this year, according to Ben Crellin. So something to bear in mind in terms of X motivation. But you're probably right in terms of the fact that at the top, that's what's really important. Goal difference is 38 for Arsenal, 37 for City. Teams are going to start to be put to the sword by both of them, which is very exciting for the end of the year. Just wish there was a captainable asset for Arsenal, really.
Yeah.
If someone is absolutely debonair, you could read the tea leaves on the game on the setup against Atleti and go, okay, well, this player hasn't played, but he's come off the bench or something like that. So Eza or something like that. But I just can't see us being a team that's going to turn around and start putting teams to the sword right now because we've got so many things going on. Talk to me again in game of 37 when we've got Burnley.
Yeah.
And hey, you know what? We could both be sat here going, yeah, Gyökeres, straight in, captain, let's do it. Vibes of Leeds game week 2. Yeah, I think it's probably Haaland this week from all kinds of perspectives and just accepting the fact you'll probably be playing with 10 because Bruno's probably going to be a loser in the book, regardless of what he does. And just hope that, don't like it when it's your own player, but just hope that Van Dijk and Canate show up. On to our teams for this week then. Is that that's your team in a 4-3-3?
My one. Very, very similar team. So 4-3-3 for me at the moment, but there's definitely an argument to start at least 2 of my bench players instead. So Darlow in goal at home to Burnley. I am going Leeds double up defensively with Struijk as well. Decent odds of a clean sheet at home to relegated Burnley, of course. I've got Gabriel in already against Fulham, O'Reilly away at Everton. Those guys just pick themselves. And then I've got Hill starting at home to Crystal Palace. Decent odds of a clean sheet. I think Palace will have one eye on Europe. And of course, he's got great DEFCON hit rate as well. So a few different ways that he could accumulate points there. In midfield, Bruno doesn't have the armband at the moment, but is, I suppose, in the mix. Palmer as well, I think, as an outside shout. Nottingham Forest at home will probably stay for me. If Saka looked like he was going to just come straight in and get 90 minutes from now on, I would be tempted to make that move, but I haven't seen enough yet. So Palmer stays for another week. Semenyo, similar, could be moved on to Cherky, but I'll probably give it another week just to see. And then I can make a decision ahead of 36 and figure out what I'm doing ahead of the double and making sure I've got the right triple for Man City there. And then up front, similar story, really. Haaland with the captaincy. João Pedro gets another week, a bit like Palmer, probably just to prove himself. And then once Nottingham Forest out the way, I might look at moving him on. Tempted to go to Thiago, not going to lie. That is in the mix, but I don't think I'm going to do it. And then Burnley at home for Calvert-Lewin as well. The big decision for me is probably, do I bench Tav at home to Crystal Palace, Gross at home to Newcastle, or can they come in for someone in my starting 11 at the moment? Maybe even João Pedro or Semenyo, arguably, could be reasonable players to put on your bench, but this is the way I'm currently set up. This was my first instinct, spent about 20 seconds deliberating it, and I think I'm pretty happy with that instinct on the bench order, unless you're about to tell me otherwise.
Nope, I'm completely fine with that. Despite the fact that Newcastle aren't particularly good, I've got the same as you, and I think that the Brighton guys primed to come in for 36 for Wolves, but I at this point I'll have no regrets if they do perform up at St James's. Despite the fact that I've got one on the bench, I think it is what it is. We've got really deep teams, and unusually for me, somebody who hates bench points, so I'm just going to have to just accept it. I think I'm going to have other things to worry about, to be fair. And for me, yeah, exactly. You're probably going to be kind of reaching for the isotonic drinks, aren't you? Whereas I'm going to be reaching for any sort of semblance of sanity. Anyway, so for me, I've got the same team as you. I've got Senesi over your Struijk, and I've got a rule. It's just basically defender free. What I do with that, I've got Tav on the pitch, unlike you, just because I've got Struijk to worry about. I think that actually this week I'm actually exposed to a Leeds clean sheet massively. I think that's going to be a massive loser in the books for me, just Darlow, but it is what it is. Defender free is my main sort of question. I've got Senesi and Hill, probably Van Hecker, the two of them. I'm going to give Senesi a nod at the moment. I think he's not highly as owned as Hill. He's got the GA threat. Part of me thinks I should cover the exposure with Hill. So some def cons are there, but Senesi feels just a bit more fun. I'll play him, and it really kind of underlines where we are with FPL. That's kind of the nature of things at the moment.
Big call.
Big call. I'm sure it's going to do not very much. I mean, I can't lose. I'm sure I won't lose that much unless kind of Hill amends these kind of own goals over the last couple of weeks by scoring a brace, in which case I'll be a bit annoyed, but it is what it is. I'm not going to make a transfer this week. I was seriously considering doing Semenyo to Cherky. I was seriously considering doing João Pedro to Thiago. I could go down either of those routes come Friday. I think it's very unlikely. I think kind of ending this season on a tiny bit of a autopilot, I'm going to say, because the team's quite strong and we've got a few kind of clear targets to the transfers we've discussed over the last couple of weeks. Kind of suits me given my life situation. So, but yeah, I'm more than happy to roll it this week.
Yeah,
but yeah, I think it'd be interesting to see what the effective ownerships turn out like. It'd be really interesting to see what wildcarders go with. Really interesting to see over this week, and also 36, 37, depending on what double comes about, what the effective ownerships look like. But yeah, I think that pretty set this week. I just made the transfer, made the moves in terms of moving players around on Friday, and I think it's just going to stay where it is.
Yeah,
effectively for one more week, and next week will be more interesting. And next week I will be probably listening to you and whoever comes on. Hopefully Tom Campbell, but he's in the same situation as me with the baby on the way. So it might just be you, Sam, listening to your dulcet tones.
Very hungover Sam trying to survive. Yeah, it's going to be great.
See if you get Nick on or something. We'll see.
I'll try and do you proud if it is just me. I'll see if I can find another sub as well to come in if either Tom is unavailable. But there'll be a pod. Don't worry about that. Never worry. Anyway, I think we're all done, aren't we, Tom? We can say our goodbyes. So thank you all so much for listening and for watching. As always, we have been Who Got the Assist. You can find us on Blue Sky at Who Got the Assist, all written out one word. Myself at FPL Pricey. On X, it's WGTA_FPL. FPL Pricey for me there as well. And on YouTube, it's Who Got the Assist. Again, all written out one word. And I'm on there at FPL Pricey. If you did enjoy the pod, please do one or all of the following. Follow us on those social channels, please. Give us a 5-star rating wherever you're listening. And of course, if you could leave a like, hit subscribe on YouTube, that would be greatly, greatly appreciated. All of those things really do help us get the pod out there. Thank you all so much. And Tom, good luck. Hopefully, I won't see you next week because everything's going swimmingly. But yeah, we'll see you on the other side, and massive luck to you, mate.
Thank you. If I am here, I'll be like, check my. No, I won't be here if there's a baby. I'll be I'm here. I'll be checking my phone like every 2 seconds. Are you in labour yet? You're in labour yet? No. Thanks so much, and thanks everybody. Good luck on your stag do. Just remember, isotonics are your friend. Eating is your friend. Hopefully, you're allowed to have something before you go on and doubtless get slaughtered to a horrible degree. Anyway, I hope you look forward to blank game week 30 to a game week 35. WTA will be back next Tuesday as normal. Sam will definitely be here. I suspect I won't be, but if not, somebody else will step in. Either way, WTA will see you next Tuesday.
Oh, it's a goal. Who got the assist?